Welcome to History Collective, where we journey through legendary tales and drift into restful sleep. Tonight, we'll explore the gentle story of Apollo, the god of sunlight, music, and prophecy. Follow Apollo from his extraordinary birth to becoming one of Olympus's most beloved deities. Experience his bond with his twin sister Artemis and discover how he brought music and wisdom to humanity. Before we start, hit the like button, subscribe for more relaxing stories, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and the current time for you. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and settle into comfort. Apollo awaits. Sweet dreams. In the ancient tapestry of Greek mythology, the tale of Apollo begins with a mother's desperate search for refuge. His mother, the Titaness Leto, was once the object of Zeus's affection, and in time she became pregnant with twins, Apollo and his sister, Artemis. Yet this union stirred the fierce jealousy of Hera, Zeus's wife. Determined to make Leto's life as difficult as possible, Hera issued a decree across the lands. No place under the sun should offer shelter to the woman carrying Zeus's children. With Hera's wrath looming, Leto roamed far and wide, seeking a haven where she could give birth in safety. Her plight continued until she discovered a rugged, barren island called Delos. At that time, Delos was said to be a floating isle, untethered and drifting across the sea. Perhaps this drifting nature of Delos placed it beyond Hera's strict prohibition, for it wasn't exactly firm land under the sun. Whichever the reason, Delos found compassion for the homeless Titaness. When Leto arrived, the island promised sanctuary on one condition, that Leto swear Apollo once born would forever favor and bless Delos. Eager and grateful, Leto agreed without hesitation, vowing that her son would bring honor to this humble patch of earth. Delos soon proved its worth. Despite its rocky surface and scarce vegetation, the island transformed into a place brimming with protective, nurturing energy for the laboring Titaness. With the other goddesses, including Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, lending their aid, Leto endured the painful process of childbirth. First, she brought forth a daughter, the huntress Artemis, who emerged as if guided by the spirit of the wilderness itself. Artemis was quick-witted, strong, and took after her mother's courageous nature. Not long after, Leto prepared for the second child. The birthing pains were intense and prolonged. Some legends say that Hera, still nursing her wrath, tried to prevent Eileithyia from hearing Leto's calls. But ultimately, the goddess of childbirth did arrive on Delos, allowing Leto to deliver a radiant boy, Apollo. The moment he drew his first breath, light seemed to cascade over the island, as if recognizing the divine power that had just entered the world. It is said that at the instant of his birth, Delos, once adrift, anchored itself to the seafloor, becoming a stable landmass. This miraculous event symbolized Apollo's role as a god of order, harmony, and illumination. Thus began the life of Apollo. Even in infancy, he was destined for greatness. As the offspring of Zeus, king of the gods, and Leto, a wise Titaness, Apollo inherited both divine authority and a benevolent nature. Delos, in turn, became a hallowed location, cherished by gods and mortals alike. Over time, pilgrims would journey across vast distances to pay homage to Apollo and Artemis, offering rich tributes to the island that had once provided desperate refuge to their mother. In this way, Apollo's birth was not simply the start of a god's life story. It was a powerful testament to resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between deity and land. From these humble yet magical beginnings on Delos, Apollo would grow to become one of the most revered Olympian gods, celebrated for his music, prophecy, healing, archery, and his eventual association with the sun's radiant might. From the moment he first drew breath on Delos, Apollo's radiant aura marked him as a child unlike any other. Even as an infant, he carried himself with a calm confidence that hinted at his future greatness. While his twin sister, Artemis, took after their mother Leto's fierce independence, Apollo stood out for his gentle yet striking demeanor. His golden hair said to shimmer like sunbeams, and his deep, knowing eyes left many convinced he possessed not only exceptional beauty, but also extraordinary wisdom. Stories differ on how the twins spent their earliest years, yet in every version, it's clear that both grew rapidly. Deities rarely remain helpless babes for long. Under the guidance of their mother, they roamed the wilds of Delos, gaining a love for nature and an appreciation for mortal devotion. Delos became a safe haven for them, as Zeus had decreed that no harm should befall his children there. Indeed, one of the first promises Leto secured from Delos was that Apollo would one day watch over the island that sheltered them from Hera's wrath. Thus, from his infancy, Apollo's future seemed intertwined with the fate of Delos. The once drifting isle found stability, and Apollo found purpose. By the time Apollo reached youth, he began to demonstrate his many gifts. Among them, one of the most celebrated was his affinity for music. According to legend, his half-brother Hermes crafted the first lyre from a tortoise shell and sinew. Initially, Hermes was up to his playful mischief when he took a few of Apollo's prized cattle, herding them away as part of an elaborate prank. When Apollo confronted him, Hermes offered this marvelous lyre as a peace offering, marvelously strung and capable of producing otherworldly melodies. The moment Apollo's fingers touched its strings, an enchanting sound filled the air, captivating gods and mortals alike. From that day on, the lyre would become Apollo's inseparable companion, symbolizing his mastery over music. Yet Apollo's promise went far beyond music. He revealed an innate ability to heal, a skill he would refine over time. Some say that even in childhood, Apollo discovered that certain herbs and proper incantations could soothe fevers and close wounds. It was not long before the earliest worshippers approached him for help, recognizing in him a power to protect from sickness, as well as to inflict harm if he so chose. Here, at the threshold of youth, Apollo learned that his gifts came with responsibilities. To wield divine authority fairly would be a lifelong trial. Though gentle-mannered, Apollo's spark of ambition set him on a path to prove himself in the realm of the gods. He aimed to reflect his father Zeus's majesty, but at the same time maintained a soft-hearted concern for the mortals who revered him. He also developed a strong sense of justice, marked by the vow to punish wrongdoing, yet remain compassionate toward those who sought to better themselves. While many gods grew up among Olympus's golden halls, Apollo found his upbringing as much on Delos as amid the rest of the Olympians. His presence inspired the people who lived and worked near the sanctuary his birth had graced. Each passing year heightened their devotion, and each prayer directed to Apollo strengthened his role as both protector and punisher, as well as inspirer of art and keeper of oracles yet to come. Brimming with potential, Apollo was poised to fulfill the powerful destiny whispered about from the day he was born. Surrounded by divine kin, an adoring mortal populace, and the everlasting memory of Delos's hospitality, the young god harbored an unshakable sense of purpose. It would not be long before he stepped forward to claim his rightful place among the immortals, a beacon of hope, music, and truth across the Greek world and beyond. Among the many feats that would shape Apollo's legend, none loomed larger than the battle for Delphi, the sacred site that would become his most famous domain. In ancient times, Delphi was believed to lie at the center of the world, often called the navel of the earth, and it was watched over by a fearsome guardian known as Python. This colossal serpent was said to have emerged from the very depths of the earth, an ancient being tied to primordial powers. Some myths claimed that Python had once been an ally of Gaia, the Earth Mother, while others whispered that Hera, still resentful of Leto, had placed Python at Delphi to keep Apollo from ever claiming it as his own. Whatever Python's origins, it was clear that Delphi was a place of immense mystical importance. The rocky slopes of Mount Parnassus, looming high above, resonated with an otherworldly energy. Chasms in the earth were believed to emit vapors that connected mortals to divine prophecy. Druids and early seers who settled there recognized the site's potency for communion with the gods. Yet, as long as the monstrous Python coiled among its caves, Delphi remained a perilous realm. Word reached Apollo that if he could secure Delphi, he would not only protect mortals, but establish a powerful oracle, one that would allow him to share guidance and foresight with all who sought the truth. With a mix of courage and conviction, Apollo set forth on his journey. Clutching his silver bow, a gift from his father Zeus, he followed the winding paths through the mountains until he arrived at the mouth of the cave where Python lurked. The moment Apollo stepped onto the stony ground, a hiss echoed through the cavern. The great serpent slithered into view, scales scraping across the rocky floor. Its eyes gleamed like molten gold, and its massive coils suggested overwhelming strength. Rather than shy away, Apollo stood firm, his divine aura suffusing the air with an almost palpable light. In the battle that followed, the serpent lunged, mighty jaws snapping with primal fury. Apollo deftly evaded the attack, drawing back his bow in a single, fluid motion. A sharp twang filled the silence as arrows of pure light flew forth. These were no ordinary weapons, but divine arrows said to carry the might of the sun itself. Python roared in pain as each arrow found its mark. The serpent's thrashing shook the mountainside, sending boulders tumbling, but Apollo pressed on relentlessly, his skill unmatched and his will unbreakable. At last, with a final cry, Python collapsed upon the rocky ground, subdued by the young god's might. In that decisive moment, Delphi was freed. The monstrous guardian no longer loomed as a threat, and Apollo's triumph was absolute. Word of the serpent's defeat spread swiftly, and soon mortals flocked to Delphi to pay homage to Apollo, grateful to be liberated from Python's terror. Determined to honor the sanctity of this victory, Apollo established the Delphic oracle on the very spot Python had guarded. Over the centuries, priests and priestesses at Delphi relayed Apollo's prophecies in cryptic, powerful messages, guiding countless kings, heroes, and everyday people. In doing so, Apollo fulfilled his grand vision. Delphi became the brilliant centerpiece of his divine influence, a place where mortals could seek truth, knowledge, and counsel. For many, the story of Apollo's defeat of Python symbolized the triumph of reason and light over chaos and darkness. The caves where Python once dwelled now resonated with Apollo's gentle, enlightened spirit. From this day forward, Delphi stood not as a lair of monstrous danger, but as a radiant beacon of prophecy and divine hope, reflecting the glory and purpose of the god who claimed it. With the monstrous Python defeated, Apollo did more than simply wrest control of Delphi. He transformed it into the pinnacle of divine guidance for the ancient world. This transformation began once the serpent's presence no longer haunted the cavernous depths beneath Mount Parnassus, allowing a far more beneficent power, Apollo's own radiance, to fill the place. In the aftermath, the god chose to install his oracle, a channel through which he would commune with mortals. This decision, though grand, was also fitting. Delphi, sometimes called the navel of the earth, seemed destined to be the crossroads where gods and humanity met in search of truth. At the heart of the sanctuary stood the Temple of Apollo, a structure that would undergo multiple reconstructions over the centuries, but always held the same essential purpose. Mortals came from near and far, kings, warriors, statesmen, and commoners alike, yearning to hear the words of the deity who now reigned supreme in Delphi. Inside the temple's inner chamber, known as the Adyton, sat the Pythia, the high priestess of Apollo. Taking her name from the serpentine foe Apollo had slain, the Pythia channeled the god's voice, offering prophetic insights often cloaked in cryptic or poetic form. The process of consulting the oracle was steeped in ritual. Petitioners typically purified themselves with water from the sacred Castalian spring, a bubbling font nestled in the rocky slopes near Delphi. They also brought offerings such as loaves of bread, laurel leaves, symbolic of Apollo's connection to the laurel tree, or incense to show their devotion. Only then, cleansed and prepared, could they approach the temple steps, anxiously awaiting a moment with the Pythia. Within the Adyton, the Pythia often sat on a tripod set above a fissure in the ground. From this chasm, vapors were said to rise, earthly emanations that heightened her trance-like state. In this altered consciousness, the Pythia would murmur or speak words believed to flow directly from Apollo. To onlookers, she seemed entranced, sometimes trembling or swaying as though she felt the immediate presence of the god. Priests and attendants nearby would then interpret or transcribe her ecstatic utterances, delivering them to the supplicant. These pronouncements could be wondrously enlightening or maddeningly ambiguous. Yet, no matter how obscure, they wielded profound influence over individual lives and the fate of entire cities. As word of Delphi's power spread, so too did the fame of Apollo's oracle. Leaders from around the Greek world and beyond sought guidance before embarking on wars, founding new colonies, or making weighty political decisions. Venerable Greek playwrights and historians recorded how the Pythia shaped these pivotal choices, weaving Delphi's voice into the tapestry of Hellenic civilization. Even foreign dignitaries, though they might worship other gods, recognized the sanctity and potential benefit of hearing Apollo's counsel, crossing seas and mountains for a chance to stand in the shadow of his temple. In time, Delphi became not just a religious center, but a hub of culture, diplomacy, and art. Pilgrims built treasuries, small, ornate structures to house gifts, dedicated to Apollo, lining the sacred way that meandered up to the temple entrance. Statues of victorious athletes, tributes to war heroes, and statues capturing legends from Greek myth stood like silent witnesses to the continuous stream of worshippers. Through it all, the Pythia remained the living conduit for Apollo's wisdom, reinforcing the god's enduring reputation as a patron of prophecy, enlightenment, and moral order. Thus, where Python once struck fear, the oracle of Delphi now brought hope, guidance, and sometimes dire warnings. Overcoming the darkest corner of the ancient world, Apollo shed his bright influence on the hearts and minds of mortals who trusted him to illuminate their fate. Delphi's name would become synonymous with the pursuit of truth, a pursuit as infinite and radiant as the god who claimed it. Though renowned for his heroic deeds and prophetic insight, Apollo was also subject to passions and misfortunes, none more poignant than his ill-fated encounter with Daphne, the daughter of the river god Peneus. Their story began not with a tender courtship, but with the mischievous intervention of Eros, often called Cupid. Bitter at Apollo for mocking his archery, Eros decided to teach the sun-bright god a lesson about love. From his quiver, Eros drew 2 arrows, one tipped with gold and another tipped with lead. The golden arrow, once it pierced a heart, kindled an unwavering passion. The leaden arrow, by contrast, spurred profound aversion. Eros knocked the golden arrow aimed at Apollo and let it fly, striking him and igniting an instant, all-consuming love for Daphne. Then, turning his bow on Daphne, Eros loosed the leaden arrow. Its cold metal lodged in the nymph's heart, condemning her to reject Apollo's affections. Unaware of these divine manipulations, Apollo suddenly found himself enthralled by Daphne's every aspect, her grace, her quiet beauty, and even her refusal to be swayed by mortal or immortal suitors. Daphne, however, felt only a rising sense of dread each time Apollo tried to approach her, an inexplicable repulsion that made her flee whenever she caught the faintest glimpse of him. She had always cherished her independence, pledging her life to the wilderness and the hunt, a devotion similar to Apollo's own twin sister, Artemis. Now Daphne's aversion transformed into terror as Apollo pursued her, driven by a love that neither reason nor pride could temper. In vain did Daphne attempt to escape Apollo's advances. Through shadowy groves and along the banks of winding rivers, his footsteps followed. He called out to her, pleas of admiration, promises of devotion, declarations of his own power as a son of Zeus, all fell on ears deafened by desperation. The fleeing nymph could not separate his words from the tidal wave of unwanted desire pressing upon her soul. Deeper and deeper she ran into the forest, lungs burning, heart pounding, until at last she realized she could not outrun a god. Worn and frantic, Daphne cried out to her father, Peneus, for deliverance. She begged him to let her remain forever free of Apollo's grasp, even if it meant forsaking her human form. As Apollo closed the distance between them, an eerie hush descended upon the clearing. Suddenly, Daphne's slender limbs stiffened, her soft skin hardened into bark, and her flowing hair sprouted into quivering leaves. Her arms lifted upward, transforming into branches. By the time Apollo's hand touched her, Daphne was no longer a maiden, but a laurel tree, rooted firmly to the spot. Struck with dismay, Apollo pressed himself against the tree's rough bark, still pulsing faintly with the essence of Daphne's spirit. In her new form, she could neither speak nor retreat, though her leaves trembled as if in sorrowful answer to his grief. Recognizing the permanent nature of this metamorphosis, Apollo wept. Determined to preserve what remained of her, he gently proclaimed that the laurel would remain sacred, forever bound to his identity. In memory of Daphne, laurel wreaths would grace the brows of poets, heroes, and rulers who earned Apollo's favor. Thus, the very tree that once was Daphne became the emblem of Apollo's domain, an enduring reminder of love's complexity, the interplay of attraction and aversion, and the irreversible consequences of rash divine meddling. More than a mere cautionary tale, the tragedy of Apollo and Daphne revealed that even the brightest of gods could be subdued by passion and heartbreak. Through her loss, Apollo gained humility, coming to understand that his powers had their limits, especially when faced with the untamed mystery of love. When Daphne, pursued by Apollo, was transformed into a laurel tree by the will of her father, the river god Peneus, the event transcended mere myth. It became a resounding symbol forever entwined with the god of music, prophecy, and light. As Apollo stood before Daphne's transformed figure, sorrow and reverence welled in his heart. Though he could no longer speak with her, the presence of her spirit lived on within the rustling leaves, a quiet testament to fate's unpredictable reach. It was then that Apollo vowed the laurel would remain eternally sacred in her honor, ensuring that her identity would not vanish from the world. Laurel, or Daphne in Greek, is more than just a mythic tree. Beyond its practical uses, its leaves are aromatic and have historically served culinary or medicinal roles. Its association with Apollo turned it into a potent emblem of triumph and poetic inspiration. In Greek tradition, victory wreaths fashioned from laurel leaves crowned the heads of athletes, heroes, and champions, reflecting a lineage of achievement the ancients believed was pleasing to the god who had both vanquished Python and honored Daphne. Laurel wreaths also came to grace the brows of poets, those who sought Apollo's favor for the gift of eloquence and creativity. Over time, this practice spread far beyond the Greek world, influencing Roman customs as well. Generals returning from successful campaigns would don laurel crowns in lavish triumph processions, parading through the streets of Rome as living symbols of the divine endorsement conferred by Apollo or by Jupiter in the Roman pantheon, who absorbed many of Zeus's traits. Even in modern times, the word laureate, as in poet laureate, preserves this ancient motif, connecting intellectual and cultural achievement with the laurel's evergreen nature. To the Greeks, the evergreen quality of the laurel tree underscored the eternal essence of Apollo's vow. While many deciduous trees shed their leaves each year, the laurel remained verdant, signifying the constancy of Apollo's affection and Daphne's perpetual memory. Festivals dedicated to Apollo, such as those at Delphi or Delos, incorporated laurel in their rituals. Priests would wave or wear laurel branches, believing the rustling leaves served as a conduit for the god's presence. Some even chewed laurel or burned it in censers, hoping its fragrance would invoke Apollo's favor or enhance prophetic visions. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of the laurel's symbolism is how it encapsulates the duality of Apollo's nature, his brilliance in the arts and his susceptibility to very human emotions like unrequited love and sorrow. In giving his devotion to the laurel, Apollo not only immortalized Daphne's spirit, but also left a piece of himself in the waking world. Each laurel wreath worn in poetry recitals, sporting competitions, or triumphant ceremonies echoes the bittersweet story, a reminder that glory can be born from sacrifice and that suffering can yield enduring beauty. Such a richly layered symbol exemplifies why the myth of Apollo and Daphne has resonated across millennia. Whether in the form of carved statues, Renaissance paintings, or lines of heartfelt poetry, the laurel tree stands as an emblem of both heartbreak and honor. It demonstrates that while Apollo's power may be mighty, capable of felling serpents and illuminating the darkest corners of the earth, his spirit is also moved by profound compassion, respect, and devotion. Today, the laurel remains a fixture in Western culture. Academic achievements, baccalaureate, derives partially from the word laurel. Scholarly accolades and ceremonial attire all trace their heritage back to Apollo's vow. In each laurel branch or wreath, one can glimpse the depth of mythic narrative that propelled Apollo's status from mere Olympian god to a guardian of human aspirations, creativity, and moral understanding. At the heart of it all lies the unspoken memory of Daphne, whose essential being, now hidden within the rustle of evergreen leaves, reminds us that love, whether fulfilled or tragically thwarted, can shape destinies that echo through time. Apollo's relationship with music was never a mere pastime. It was a defining feature of his divine identity. As the master of the lyre, an instrument often said to have been fashioned by his cunning half-brother Hermes, Apollo's skill surpassed that of any mortal or immortal musician. Yet this supremacy was not always taken for granted, and it gave rise to famed contests that tested both Apollo's artistry and, at times, his patience. One of the most famous stories of Apollo's musical competitions involves the satyr Marsyas. A creature of the wild, part man and part goat, Marsyas was gifted in playing the aulos, a double-reed flute. According to legend, the goddess Athena originally crafted this flute, but discarded it when she realized it distorted her features as she played. Marsyas discovered the abandoned aulos and taught himself to create stirring, entrancing melodies that evoked the rustic spirit of forests and mountain glades. Marsyas's talent flourished to such a degree that he proudly proclaimed his music the equal of Apollo's lyre. Perhaps egged on by overconfidence or simply misguided bravery, Marsyas challenged the god of music himself to a contest. Intrigued, If not slightly offended, Apollo agreed to the challenge on the condition that the victor could name any punishment for the loser. Marsyas, brimming with confidence, accepted without hesitation. Before a gathering of mortals and divinities, the two took turns displaying the very heights of their musical prowess. When Marsyas raised the aulos to his lips, he conjured visions of woodland revels and the primal beat of nature. His skill was undeniable. The onlookers found themselves enthralled by the satyr's untamed melodies. Yet when Apollo stepped forward, the resonance of the lyre transcended worldly bounds, infusing listeners with a sense of cosmic harmony and light. His fingers danced across the strings, weaving an ethereal tapestry that seemed to envelop all creation. The contest appeared close until Apollo devised a cunning test to tip the scales. He proposed both should play their instruments upside down. While Apollo managed the feat by inverting his lyre, Marsyas could not replicate the same effect with his aulos. A flute, after all, cannot be played properly from the wrong end. This clever twist revealed the fundamental superiority of Apollo's art, an elegance and versatility that even Marsyas's raw talent could not match. Declared the winner, Apollo asserted his divine authority. Grieved by Marsyas's earlier boast, he imposed a harsh punishment. He flayed the satyr alive. Some myths suggest Apollo later regretted his severity, while others argue that this brutal outcome served as a timeless warning against hubris. Regardless, from Marsyas's spilled blood sprang the river that bore his name, a haunting testament to the tragic cost of challenging a god at his own craft. Apollo's dominance as a musician was tested once more in another famous showdown, this time with the rustic god Pan, and in some versions King Midas as the judge. When Pan's flute, called the panpipes, competed against Apollo's lyre, even the playful nature of Pan could not surpass the bright clarity of the lyre's chords. Infamously, King Midas favored Pan's pastoral tune, causing Apollo to transform the king's ears into those of a donkey for his lack of musical discernment. In the wake of these competitions, Apollo's prestige as the paragon of musical artistry stood unchallenged. Still, these stories illustrate that the god's brilliance could sometimes harbor a stern or even vengeful streak. They serve as reminders that Apollo embodied more than mere inspiration. He also embodied discipline, justice, and the potent consequences of crossing divine boundaries. Music, in this light, was not just a source of beauty and harmony, but also a wellspring of dramatic conflict, where mortals who pushed the limits faced the swift and sometimes terrifying retribution of the Olympians. Apollo's reputation as a radiant god of music and prophecy is matched only by his paradoxical role as both a divine healer and a bearer of devastation. In the tapestry of Greek mythology, no deity better exemplifies the delicate balance between the power to save and the power to destroy. Indeed, it is said that Apollo's arrows, shimmering shafts of light, could deliver disease just as swiftly as they could ward it off. From the moment of his youth, Apollo was associated with medicine. Ancient Greeks credited him with the knowledge of herbal remedies and chants to ease human suffering. He was also acknowledged as the father of Asclepius, the preeminent god of healing. In many versions of the myth, Apollo passed his medicinal wisdom to Asclepius, who later became renowned for his skill in surgery and in saving mortals from death's doorstep. So admired was Asclepius's prowess that he even attempted to resurrect the dead, prompting Zeus to strike him down with a thunderbolt for disrupting the natural cycle of life and death. This tragic event illustrated both the potency of Apollo's lineage in healing and the immutable limits set by the higher Olympians. Yet Apollo's talent for healing possessed a double edge. The same bow that smote the monstrous Python could send plagues upon mortals. One of the most famous examples of Apollo's wrath occurred during the Trojan War, as recounted in Homer's Iliad. A Trojan priest named Chryses, devoted to Apollo, approached the Greek army to plead for the release of his captive daughter. When the Greeks spurned his request, Chryses prayed to Apollo for retribution. Moved by the priest's earnest supplication, Apollo descended from Olympus, his silver bow glinting ominously, and unleashed a volley of plague-bearing arrows upon the Greek camp. In short order, warriors and animals alike succumbed to sickness and death. Only once the Greeks atoned for their insult by returning Chryses' daughter did Apollo relent, lifting the scourge he had inflicted. This duality underscores the deep respect and wariness with which mortals approached Apollo. They could beseech him for protection against epidemics, offering sacrifices at his shrines and temples, hoping for his favor. At the same time, they knew that a single moment of his rage could bring entire populations to their knees. In many cities, festivals in Apollo's honor included rites that aimed to avert disease. Priests carried laurel branches, sprinkled holy water, or burned offerings intended to placate the god. Delphi and other great sanctuaries often served as places where the sick or troubled could journey to seek Apollo's guidance, trusting that his oracles might reveal cures or ways to escape misfortune. Beyond literal disease, Apollo's role as bringer of plagues encompassed any form of divine punishment that might afflict communities. Whether it was through famine, conflict, or personal calamity, the Greeks viewed Apollo as the celestial arbiter who maintained a moral order by striking down hubris and injustice. Conversely, his healing aspect reinforced his image as a benevolent protector, especially for those who led virtuous lives or sought earnest repentance. In all of these tales, Apollo emerges as a figure of equilibrium. Just as his music can soothe hearts or rouse souls, his bow can defend the righteous or devastate the unworthy. His power to bestow health or unleash illness reminds mortals, and even other gods, that the forces binding life and death are rarely separated by more than a hair's breadth. Through Apollo, the Greeks learned that divine favor and wrath often reside side by side, challenging humanity to cultivate wisdom, piety, and respect for the mysteries that guide the mortal realm. In the earlier epochs of Greek mythology, the daily journey of the sun across the sky was attributed to Helios, a titan who drove his flaming chariot from east to west each day. However, as Greek religious beliefs evolved and the Olympian gods took center stage, Apollo gradually absorbed many of Helios's solar attributes. This merging of identities signaled a shift in how mortals perceived the light-bringing deity, elevating Apollo beyond his roles in music, prophecy, and healing to also become a radiant harbinger of the dawn. Despite often being conflated, Helios and Apollo remained distinct in the myths for some time. Helios was viewed as the literal sun god, tirelessly guiding his fiery steeds across the heavens, while Apollo's sphere of influence originally encompassed archery, music, and oracular wisdom. Over centuries of worship and poetic tradition, storytellers and religious devotees began to see parallels in the two beings who shared a pivotal solar connection, Helios as the physical sun, and Apollo as a metaphorical embodiment of illumination and enlightenment. This blending of personas is perhaps best demonstrated by the artwork and literature that emerged during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. Poets invoked Apollo's radiance as if it were sunlight made manifest, imbuing him with an aura of brilliance that guided mortals out of ignorance. Statues and frescoes started portraying Apollo with a corona or halo, symbolizing his luminous power. Worshippers prayed to him for clear days during agricultural seasons, asking for the life-giving warmth that his presence implied. In turn, Apollo grew to represent more than just a localized patron of Delphi. He became a vital cosmic force, one intimately tied to the cyclical dance of night and day. A key motif that popularized Apollo's solar role was the chariot ride. As Helios had been depicted in a chariot drawn by 4 horses, each one a living embodiment of fiery energy, so too did Apollo come to be described driving a shining chariot across the vault of the sky. Though this imagery was not universally accepted throughout the entirety of Greek myth, it became prevalent enough in Roman times that Apollo was celebrated in shrines that combined both his oracular and solar aspects. Festivals, processions, and hymns would praise his unyielding power to banish darkness and bring warmth to mortal life. Yet Apollo's identity as the sun god did more than link him to the day's natural light. It also tied into his long-established reputation as a deity of reason and clarity. Just as the sun illuminates the physical world, Apollo was believed to illuminate the mind and spirit, cutting through the murkiness of ignorance or falsehood. His oracles at Delphi, revered for their penetrating insight, paralleled the sun's steady, piercing rays. In times of uncertainty, whether personal or political, the Greeks turned to Apollo not just for prophecy, but for a guiding light that would reveal truth, even if it came in cryptic form. The merging of Helios and Apollo also provided a more unified cosmology for later writers and theologians. By attributing the sun's life-sustaining path to Apollo's divine will, mortals could comprehend their dependence on this god in both material and spiritual terms. Where Helios alone might have signified the raw, unfiltered power of nature, Apollo came to symbolize a more nuanced aspect of the sun, a force imbued with rationality, harmony, and a desire for the flourishing of mortal communities. In this way, Apollo's solar association enriched his existing portfolio of influence. No longer was he solely a master musician, an infallible oracle, or a lethal archer. He now also shaped the daily rhythm of life, bringing dawn and its promise of renewal. And as the sun set beyond the distant horizon, Apollo's absence highlighted the fragility of civilization in the face of darkness, a constant reminder that light, knowledge, and order must be cultivated and cherished. Thus, over time, when Greeks and Romans alike gazed skyward at daybreak, they did not just see the fiery chariot of a Titan, they also envisioned the shining presence of a god who stood for wisdom, creativity, and the constant potential for rebirth. To this day, Apollo's solar legacy persists in cultural memory, reminding us of the profound comfort and insight that follows in the wake of his illuminating grace. Apollo's importance in Greek mythology can scarcely be overstated. By the time the classical age reached its height, he had attained a status as one of the most beloved and widely worshipped Olympian gods, a protector of civilization, a guardian of the arts, and a dispenser of both mercy and judgment. From his legendary birth on Delos to his ascendant role as the sun's radiant guide, Apollo's journey shaped not only Greek religion, but also the broader cultural and intellectual life of the ancient world. One of Apollo's most enduring legacies is Delphi, the seat of his oracle, and arguably the most significant religious center in ancient Greece. For centuries, people from all levels of society, kings, generals, merchants, and farmers, traveled to consult the Pythia, seeking prophetic guidance in affairs of state, warfare, love, and spirituality. The influence of Apollo's oracle stretched well beyond the Greek mainland, enticing travelers from Lydia, Persia, and Egypt, who arrived bearing gifts to secure Apollo's favor. These interactions wove cultural threads through Delphi, making it a hub for diplomacy, commerce, and the exchange of ideas. In the process, Apollo's name became synonymous with foresight and wisdom, and his temple stood as a testament to Hellenic prestige. Beyond Delphi's walls, Apollo's ideals permeated daily life. The laurel wreath, born of Apollo's heartbreak over the nymph Daphne, became the ultimate emblem of triumph. To be laureled in ancient Greece was to be recognized for extraordinary achievement, whether on the athletic field at Olympia, in the dramatic contests of Athens, or in civic leadership. Over centuries, this symbol of victory found renewed purpose in Roman triumphs and has continued into modern times, where phrases like resting on one's laurels recall the ancient measure of success. In the arts, Apollo was revered as the muse behind the muses, so to speak. He led the muses, godly patrons of epic poetry, tragedy, comedy, history, dance, and astronomy, during their choral celebrations on Mount Helicon or Mount Parnassus. Poets, playwrights, and scholars who sought Apollo's blessing believed it would imbue their works with clarity, harmony, and lasting beauty. This Apollo-inspired flourishing of creativity helped shape the literary and artistic standards of the classical world and served as a foundation for Western culture's enduring appreciation of tragedy, epic poetry, sculpture, and architecture. In the realm of philosophy and ethics, Apollo's values resonated profoundly. Phrases like "know thyself" and "nothing in excess," both famously inscribed at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, became guiding principles for moral introspection and moderation. Philosophers such as Socrates cited the Delphic oracle, weaving Apollo's wisdom into their inquiries about virtue and knowledge. The emphasis on balance, proportion, and rational exploration in Greek thought aligned with Apollo's charm.